Hi guys, it's David here from Love Music. Today I'm going to be showing you how we do a restring of guitars when they come into a shop. So if you bring your guitar into the shop for a restring and a cleanup, this is the kind of thing that will happen to it. I'm going to be doing this today with my Martin 00015, which is one of my favourite guitars. The strings are getting a bit old and it definitely needs a bit of a restring. As we do this, I'm going to go through the different products and stuff that I use as I'm doing this. These are things that I've found over time work particularly well. You definitely don't need to use all of these things and you don't need to go out and buy all these tools. I've just found personally they tend to do a really good job of cleaning up the guitar. So I'll just get into that and I'll see you again at the end. Okay, so the first thing that we've got to do is take off the strings that are already on the guitar. Having a good quality string winder is a really important part for me for doing this, particularly if I'm doing multiple restrings throughout the day. However, if you're just doing it yourself, there's no reason why you need to have one of these. You can just wind it off by hand. A useful trick that I've got for doing it is to play the string as you're winding it off initially. That means you know you're going the right direction and you don't accidentally ping the string. So the next thing that you need to do once you've taken all the strings off of one end is to take them out of this end. You'll find a lot of string winders will have a little divot in them, which is for pulling out the strings. However, that tends to pull them out on a bit of an angle. I have a preference, which is to use a bridge pin puller. You don't need to use those. As I say, you can use the one that's on your string winder, or I have seen people use a wire cutter. You can sometimes pull them out with your fingers. It's just when I'm doing multiple restrings throughout the day, I tend to prefer this because it works a lot quicker, and you're pulling up on the string, which is putting much less pressure on the bridge, and you're much less likely to damage the bridge than you would be with the other methods. Okay, so the next part that we do is one of those nice to do kind of things. So when a guitar comes into me in the shop, inevitably it's going to need to have the fingerboard cleaned. I like to use one of two products. I like to use the Dunlop Cleaner and Prep, which theoretically you should use this with the deep conditioner, which is number 2 in their thing. I use this if it's a particularly grubby fingerboard that I'm coming across. My preference at the moment is to use the Dunlop Ultimate Lemon Oil. I find that tends to do a pretty good job. It's just, as I say, if it's a particularly grubby job that I do that. With my guitar, because I tend to be pretty clean and tend to restring my guitars pretty often, it's pretty good. So that's what I'm going to use on that. You'll see there's got an applicator pad on here that makes it a lot easier to put it on. When I'm putting it on, I'm not being too picky about getting it right into the edges, and I'll show you why in a second. So I'll just go all the way up the fingerboard with that. If you put too much stuff of this on, it won't necessarily damage your guitar, but it'll leave a bit of an oily residue behind. You can use this on the bridge of your guitar as well. If it's looking particularly dry, I'm going to use a cloth to put that onto my guitar. The reason why we like to put oil onto guitar fingerboards, particularly onto rosewood and ebony fingerboards, you shouldn't use that with a maple fingerboard, but with rosewood and ebony fingerboards, is because they can dry out, you can get cracks in them and all sorts of other problems, you can get loose frets, so all sorts of different problems. So giving the guitar a good oil, you don't need to do this often, probably not every time you restring your guitar, maybe just every other time. So you would have seen there, just as I was doing that, that I've spread the oil around when I've been doing that. I'm not being too worried about getting it on the frets, and we'll get to why in a second. So on to the next part. For cleaning the frets, I prefer to use the StewMac fret erasers. I've used all sorts of different things over time, from quadruple O, steel wool, metal polishers, all sorts of things. I find that these tend to be the best to use for doing a quick job, because I can just give it a polish without having to put masking tape down. Theoretically you probably should do it, but if you're careful, which I am, you don't tend to need to use that. They come in different grits, so for this one, I can't see what grit it is anymore, but the pink one is a coarser grit than the yellow one, which I'm about to use. So I use that kind of to clean the frets, and then the yellow one, after I've wiped off that excess lemon oil, the yellow one will give the frets a good polish. Clean frets are a nicer thing to play on. They'll also make your frets last longer, and they'll help with your guitar's intonation. So it's definitely a key part of doing it. So you can see that's coming up to a really nice polish straight away. Next we're going to move on to cleaning the body. So this guitar, this Martin 0015, has got a satin finish on it. So it's not a gloss finish, although it's a little bit old, so you're starting to see some glossy patches kind of come where I play it a lot. What you don't want to do is to use a polish on them. So normally with a gloss finish guitar I'll use like a Dunlop 65 to give it a good clean. That works particularly well and doesn't leave streaks. And then I'll use a cream of Canuba if it's a particularly, if it needs a bit more cleaning, not cleaning, a bit more polishing. When I'm using a satin finish guitar, what I use is an atomizer, so this is just from the plastic shop, and water. Every part of the guitar is sealed. I know it looks like it's a satin finish, but there is still plenty of finish on these, so you're not going to be getting the wood actually wet. And what I tend to like to do with that is to put a bit on a cloth and then give the guitar a clean. Okay, next we move on to the headstock of the guitar. You'll find that people will often complain about there being a bit of play in their machine heads or a few issues, and inevitably that's going to be because the machine heads have worked themselves loose. It always happens. Even my guitars that I'm doing often will sometimes need a little bit of an adjustment. There are two parts of the machine heads that you can do. There's the nut on the top, so that's going to keep the machine head nice and stable. This is a specific wrench that I got for the job. It's got the 10mm here. You can just use, carefully use a set of pliers, or what tends to work really well is a socket set and just getting the 10mm socket. You're not trying to tighten them as hard as you go, you're just trying to kind of finger tighten it, if that makes sense, when I'm using a wrench instead. So it's not trying to push it as hard as it can go, it's just keeping it nice and at a good tightness. The other thing is the actual machine heads themselves, and just making sure that the heads are on nicely. And this is the part that's probably going to be affecting the play in your strings more than anything else apart from the string winding themselves. And so just use the correct sized Phillips head screwdriver for that, and just give them again kind of a finger tighten go on those. Okay, so now it's time to put the strings onto the guitar. So what we're going to be doing when you put the pin in here, so the pin's going to go in on the ball. If you just put that straight down on the ball like I did there, it's just going to pull the pin straight back out again as soon as you put any pressure on that. What we're going to be trying to do is we're going to have the ball resting against the side of it, and you'll see that the pin is tapered. So what that's going to do is push this against the hole, and that's going to stop it from coming out. It can be a little tricky to do, so what I like to do is just ever so gently bend it around my finger so that it's a kind of a bit of a curved shape, and then that's going to go in. And so you'll see, if you can, you might not be able to see from there, but there should be a little bit of the winding of the string popping out the end there. Okay, so the peg head of the guitar is an important part of this, and the way I do this is slightly different from other people that I've seen. It's not that I'm saying that my way is better than any others, it's just that technique that's worked for me over the years. It will make sense once I do it. So what I do is I start off with the string, and then I go in from the opposite side to where you would think to go. So on an acoustic guitar, normally the string should come up the center and then go out to the bridge, whereas I'm coming from the outside. Then I make sure that I've got approximately 4 fingers, maybe the equivalent of 5 fingers worth of gap at the 3rd fret. Then I take that string and I wind it around the top of the machine head like this. And so now it's coming on the inside, which is where we want it to be. And by doing that, I've created the first bend here, which needs to happen, and that stops the string from pulling through. Now you notice while I'm doing this, that I never take the tension off of the string. And I'm going to use my string winder here to wind it on. Be careful that you don't poke your eye with the string that's poking up at you now. And we're constantly keeping tension on the string. And again, I give it a bit of a play as I'm doing this because I don't want to accidentally tune it too high straight away and ping the string. Now I'm going to use these string cutters. So these string cutters I got from Stu Mac. They work on anything that I've come across. I've used them on a B string, on a bass guitar, and it cuts through it no problem. They're not cheap. From memory, they were about $60 or something along those lines. But they are by far the best thing that I've come across in my almost 20 years of doing this for cutting strings. And then chuck it in the bin. So I'll just go through that technique one more time. So we go from the outside, make sure we've got 4 or 5 fingers at the 3rd fret. It depends how fat your fingers are. I tend to go for 4.5 because I've got slightly skinny fingers. You bend it around the outside, and then the tail comes up, and that means you've got a kink on this side and you've got the start of a bend on this side, so it's going to start to not pull through. And then as I'm winding it on, I'm keeping tension on the string, and I'm making sure that the winds go down the machine head. This is something I didn't talk about on the last one. And the reason why I do that is because it's increasing the break angle, or the angle that it's got coming over the nut. That's going to put more pressure on the neck, pushing it into the body, and that will increase the sustain of your strings and things like that. Again, playing it as I'm going through, and then cutting it off. With the plain strings, I prefer to have more winds on it, so I'm going for, what's that, about 6 or 7 fingers worth. But the same kind of technique. You go from the outside, curl it around to the inside, and then bend the string up and out of the way. And then you're going to be winding it down, keeping tension on the string the whole time. It's a little bit harder to see from that side. This technique of keeping the tension on is key because it means that you'll get nice tidy winds. The tidier the wind is, the less likely it is to go out of tune. So that's how we do the restrings of guitars when they're in the shop here. Definitely give it a go yourself. It's a really useful skill to have. You never know when you're going to be stuck needing to replace the strings on your guitar. Or, you know, if your guitar needs a birthday every now and then, feel free to bring it into the shop and we'll give it the full-on kind of service that it needs for its birthday. If you like what you saw here, check out some of our other videos on YouTube and give us a subscribe. Otherwise, head across to our Facebook page, which is Love Music Taupō, and see what else we've got going on. Thank you.